Hello, and welcome to the Herald's Horn. On this episode, Dan and I chop it up about a whole lot of stuff, but mostly we're talking about cEDH and the lack of ban and restricted announcements that have come from Wizards of the Coast over the last couple of weeks. When will Nadu stop terrorizing Modern? After the break, I am joined by Josh Murphy, better known by many people as Murph, the director of game nights, the editor of game nights for a very long time, a very long tenured employee of the Command Zone, who I'm sure many of you know and love. He's one of my good buds and the co-host of the other podcast I make, Level Up. It's a great interview where we talk about stuff like how he got into Magic and other stuff too, like what does storytelling in an EDH game mean? What is Murph trying to do to form a story in every Game Nights episode? Without any further ado, let's get into episode 15. Hello, welcome to the Herald's Horn, episode number 15. It is a beautiful overcast day here in Columbus, Ohio, and I am joined all the way on the line from an undisclosed location. Dan, what is up, Dan?
I was going to think of, like, you talked about the weather, and I was like, I got to do my best, like, newscaster radio voice right now, but I didn't come up with anything in time. Hello, everyone. It's Dan. I'm in Philadelphia.
You're in Philadelphia? Can you give us your street address?
Yeah, sure. It's apartment for my neighbor. This is very weird, I know, but this is actually true. So that's what I tell people on delivery apps.
All right, run the song. And welcome back. As always, we're going to jump directly into the news. But here's kind of the kicker. Not really much happened in the last 2 weeks, except for some Bloomburrow stuff, which we'll talk about later. So for the news today, I guess it's going to be a little bit more of Cal's opinion segment with Dan tuning in. Dan offering
like the hype man.
Some,
I'm like the flavor of the podcast.
You got to just be like, yeah, I agree to everything that I say. That's your job
totally.
today. So nothing has happened. So what is on the mind of the people? What are the people discussing? Of course, the Magic community as a whole right now is discussing when is Wizards of the Coast going to ban more Magic cards. People are bored, apparently, of playing the exact same 3 decks in Pioneer. The most offensive, according to many, being the Amelia combo deck. People are bored of playing against Nadu and Modern. And that's also like the Pioneer is like, everyone's bored and maybe the Amelia combo deck is a little too strong. Modern is everyone is bored because the Nadu deck is objectively way too strong. We talked about that last episode. It took down basically the entirety of the Modern Pro Tour post MH3 with no problems. And since then, we've seen some other stuff like, the Necro Dominance deck does seem pretty real. The Necro Dominance deck seems pretty real. And some other decks are doing like okay, but Nadu is crushing. And people would just like to get the bird out of the way and move on with their lives so they can like explore what else is in the format. Because like right now, Nadu is objectively the best option. And if you're going to a Modern event and not playing Nadu, you are just putting yourself in a disadvantage. Similarly, Legacy kind of has a similar situation going on right now where the printing of cards such as Psychic Frog and a couple other cards from MH3 have turned Grixis, like Riskaminator, from a quite great deck into like excellent deck, overwhelmingly best deck in the format type material. Because it turns out that like getting to Grief and then reanimate your Grief, which is like way better than scamming your Grief, actually, like people do in Modern stuff. Reanimating your Grief and then just like immediately taking 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. It's very much just like, oh, do you have Force of Will for the first Grief? No? Well, okay. Well, it's just like, do you have Force of Will for my Reanimate? Do you have Force of Will for the first Grief? No? Cool.
Yeah, Goldfish is currently showing it as 40% of the Legacy meta, which, as anyone would tell you, is inflated, not a true representation of the format. But it is extremely close to that in some senses, and like these are taken from MTGO leagues, so that is what is happening very primarily on the online client, which is where most of Legacy is being played. It is obnoxiously powerful. It puts your opponents in a position where you can't really mulligan against this deck, because if you mulligan, you're just already doing their job for them. And like you said, like, am I gonna Hymn-to-Turok myself so that my opponent can't grief me the first time and then still have Reanimate in their hand anyway? Like, it's just, it puts your opponent in just a horrible position the entire game, and it's incredibly efficient. Very good. You're playing your 4 griefs, your 4 psychic frogs, and I actually just played this deck on stream last week, so I've got the number still in my head. I think a lot of lists are playing 2 Archon of Cruelties and 1 Atraxa as like their big package, which is,
because you just can. You're already playing Reanimate, so why not Reanimate an Atraxa or an Archon or a Troll of Khazad-dûm? You just
exactly
can.
Yeah. Like in the old days where it would be Reanimate your Grizzlebrand and then put together your combo from there, you don't need to rely on these big, heavy, clunky creatures that you can't really cast. You can just have 1 or 2 of them in your deck, and they're a complete powerhouse against your opponent when you're just slamming them with Griefs and Psychic Frogs on turn 1 and 2.
And that was kind of like, before, like I said, before MH3, this deck was like known and quite good, but it did have some awkward problems of like, oh, I drew one of my 2 Atraxas. We like have to play 2 Atraxas because, oh, what if we draw 1? You know, I drew an Atraxa. What am I supposed to do with this? How do I get rid of this? Well, now you can just discard it to Psychic Frog to make your Psychic Frog bigger.
Yeah. And one thing that I did not think about until I was in the mirror match is that it also flies. You can you can exile cards from your graveyard to make it fly over your opponent's creatures on the ground. It's just so good. Block a Delver, does everything.
Yeah, exactly. I did think that the flying mode was a little bit easier to turn on than exile 3 cards, but from your graveyard. But I guess like with fetches and, you know, you play Entomb and Brainstorm and Ponder, you play a lot of really cheap spells, and you can discard cards to Psychic Frog. You know, you'll be discarding your Trolls of Khazad-dûms and maybe not want to reanimate them. Exiling 3 cards from your graveyard is not actually that huge of a cost. I'm sure that's very easy.
And I mean, even if you have your optimal turn 1 grief hand, you grief, exile a card, put grief in your graveyard, and probably play a fetch land, grab a black source, and then reanimate it. So you've got at least your fetch land and reanimate in your graveyard on
just
like an optimal turn 1.
Yeah.
So playing another fetch land on turn 2 to immediately activate your frog, not a huge problem at all.
And this is also like, I assume by the time you are like, all right, I'm on the Psychic Frog plan, you then can just discard cards to your frog, make it bigger, and then obviously it's just easier for you to give a flying because you're discarding cards. Have we mentioned that Psychic Frog draws you a card every time it deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker?
I wish I had experienced that firsthand. I did not connect with a single opponent in my league with a Psychic Frog. There was one game where it got Pyroblasted. I Force of Will, and they Pyroblasted over my Force of Will, and I just wanted to throw my computer out the window.
You said, holy pog, opponent
properly respecting. I know, they did. It was a Grixis Delver opponent with absolutely everything, but they knew to respect the Psychic Frog because it really would have just brought me through that game on its own little slimy just shoulders.
Like mono carried you throughout.
It's a fantastic card.
Yep. Well, so all of this to say, people are sick of Amelia, people are sick of Nadu, and people are sick of grief. The problem with this, of course, is that... Oh, and I should say, before we move on specifically from Legacy, Legacy, I think, is specifically very community sentiment driven in whether or not people will like go out and actually play the game. Like... Legacy events in person are small enough as is, and if there's enough people who are like, well, I don't want to play against Riskaminator, I just won't go, that will very quickly overnight kill a local Legacy scene in no time at all, and that's not good, because once scenes kind of die, they're really hard to bring back, even if Legacy becomes fixed or whatever in the very near future, so it's definitely a concern.
Yeah, it takes a while for people to adjust their decks and adjust to new metas and things like that, and it's obviously a lot harder to ban Nadu here because it is the premier card in the new set, but it is facing all of the same problems that like Uro and Oko had, for instance, back when they were very popular and legal in their respective formats, where we see 4 color piles that are just splashing Nadu and then all the other good cards from the other colors along with it. And it's just, it's in every deck and it is miserable. But they probably don't want to ban that right now. And we could very well see a sort of like Bridge from Below style ban instead of
just like ban Shuko or something.
Yeah, which I think would be... I don't know. I think it falls under a similar sort of logic of Shuko is either a card that is not good at all or it's really busted. But I don't think that is true, like in a very lateral way as it is to Bridge from Below, where Bridge from Below, I think, is in and of itself a lot more busted than Shuko can be. Shuko is like, I don't know, an enabler where I guess your Bridge from Below is your end game in some cases, as well as your enabler.
Yes, definitely.
Grief, I think, could a lot more easily be banned, but
yes, I don't think
they're certainly slow to pull the trigger on it.
Yes, and that's definitely something that I think will be interesting to see is how Wizards chooses to handle this in the very near future. Because right now, how they're handling B&Rs is like for a while they were doing like, oh, we need a B&R, we'll do one, but now they're on a set schedule again and they're like quarterly. But the next one is not for quite a while from now. But people hate Modern right now. People hate Legacy right now. Something I imagine they will have to do some kind of emergency banning of some kind out of this tenor of these quarterly updates, because if they wait until the next quarterly update to ban something out of the Nadu deck or something out of the Rescaminator deck, they just like kind of won't have these formats left. Like everyone will get sick of it and move on their merry way. And, you know, it would be weird to shake up Pioneer mid RC season, because Pioneer is the current regional championship qualifier format. But I mean, if people are super sick of playing against Amelia and that's stopping them from going out and doing Pioneer RCQs, then there might need to be something there too. I don't know. I've seen less hubbub about Pioneer, but the people who are against Amelia are really against Amelia. So
I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I just posted on Twitter today asking people what they thought should be banned and whatever their favorite format was. And very many votes for Amelia in Pioneer, as well as Treasure Cruise, I guess, too, is probably the number 2 answer.
Yeah, Treasure Cruise to like also tamp down the very good Arclight Phoenix deck.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it falls under the same problem, just like you said, of like, if people don't want to play these formats, what are they going to do? Like, Pioneer is already one of the least desirable formats to play. So if people are really not having fun playing it, I don't know. I don't know what the point, I guess, would be to hang on to not banning Amalia if people are really that mad about it.
For the listeners' benefit, is Tuesday, July 16th. We record a whole like 36 hours before we go live. Very ambitious of us to wait that to record that far ahead on a news-based show.
The South Park of MTG podcasts.
Well, I know we're gonna what's gonna happen to us, Dan, is we're gonna do this whole thing. We're gonna talk about this for like 10-15 minutes.
Do you think they're gonna do it tomorrow?
A B&R tomorrow morning. Just wait. It'll happen.
I feel like it would be on a Friday if it happens this week. I don't know why. I in my heart, I feel like it's the same thing as like firing someone. You want to do it on a Friday so Nadu can at least enjoy its weekend before it has to go to the unemployment office.
All right, let's move on from all this B&R talk. Let's talk about something we have in common, Dan. Something that people always ask me, Cal, why don't you talk about that more on the podcast? Well, I purposely made this podcast to not talk about that. But unfortunately, on this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about cEDH. Dan, do you have any opinions about competitive Elder Dragon Highlander? Any form or fashion?
Yeah, I have tons of them. I semi-professionally produce cEDH content.
Oh, shoot! Oh, brother!
Yeah. Do you want just one?
Yeah, just give me one.
Nadu sucks in this format.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Sorry, Tim. I love you, Tim. Gold Sabertooth. I love you so much.
I'm waiting to see how it turns out. It had a great first month of like tournament results. And I got to think about this at length because I did appear on the most recent Mind Sculptors Power Rankings episode. They do those, and we were Ian and other Callahan and I were talking about that a bit. And it is like the first parasitic commander that we've had, in that like it kind of just like casts its commander and does its own little wonky thing and doesn't interact with anyone. It is like the first of those commanders to like get to play Force of Will, which I think kind of matters. And it only needs like 2 cards to kind of start doing its thing. However, I think its thing is kind of bad. So it's a tough spot to be. I think the deck's kind of sick. I don't think it's great.
Yes, I think I would probably put it, if we are doing our own power ranking right now, I think it will ultimately end up in the B tier. The deck list that I see more and more are playing fewer terrible cards, which I think is indicative of the deck like being much more refined. Yep. People were on from Legends. Sea King's Blessing is the blue version, and I cannot recall the name of the green one. That card is
so silly.
I have several copies of it. If it ever goes up in value, I'm going to be big stonks boy over here. But yes, people are playing just markedly terrible cards that you do not want to put in a very good like vintage quality deck. So I'm happy to see people not playing shit like that anymore. The lists that I see are much more refined and doing a lot better. But we're here to talk about
Dan. What do you think the cheapest Sea King's Blessing is on TCG Player right now?
I saw it listed at like $80 at one point, but
it's like $35 now.
Okay, yeah, I was going to assume that it must have dropped a lot from that because that's a common, I think.
Yeah, in May it was $4, and now it has kind of stabilized around $35. But that's a pretty like big jump.
Cents, so
yeah,
it's cool.
Exactly. There you go. Time to cash out and never work again.
I think I only have 3 copies, unfortunately for me.
Oh, brother! Time to cash out and buy yourself 3 nice vinyls, 3 nice records.
I would actually.
But yes, we are actually here to talk more specifically about the Cowtown Throwdown and a little bit associated. It was the largest cEDH tournament IRL that has been run in history. It had 256 players, I believe.
It's an amazing turnout.
Yeah, exactly. There was a fun little redemption event the next day as well. But I got to go because it was right here in ye old Columbus, Ohio. Which is, it is nice to make a nice little 11-minute drive to the tournament hall rather than all the other rigmarole I've had to do to go to events. Fly across the country and get a hotel and Uber to the event space, and I'll take my nice little car ride. Yeah, little fart noise on them. Anyways.
Little fart noise, of course, Cal's rapper name.
The event itself went very well. It was taken down by Isaac, who is a relatively new cEDH player. My understanding is that he's only been like actively playing since November, which is pretty sick. He's played Magic for longer than that, but
that makes sense.
Yeah, he's played Magic for a little bit longer than that. But he just like picked up cEDH. And I was talking to him a bit when he stopped by. He's a local to Columbus. He stopped by my house to pick up the trophy, which was shipped to my house and then accidentally left in my office. He stopped by my place to pick it up, and we were talking about it a little bit, and he was pretty much just like, yeah, I'm just like one of those people who likes to pick up a new hobby and get super into it and like do as well as I can and then drop it like 9 months later. It's a real classic personality type, I think. So we'll see how much longer Isaac is here with us playing cEDH games. But congrats to him for winning the Cowtown Throwdown. Got to take home a sword and a belt buckle and that trophy and a good chunk of quite a few $1,000s. I don't remember exactly how many, but quite a few.
I forgot that this was the competition for the sword.
Yes, there was, because it was also an Iron Deck tournament, and the Iron Deck
I have won one of these. Swords. I don't know if we've talked about this before.
Yeah, you won one of the Iron Deck things too, right? Yeah,
I won an All Hallows Eve. But Cal, please, for our listeners who don't know what the Iron Deck Challenge is, can you please explain why we are talking about a cEDH player winning a sword?
Well, okay, so historically there have been Iron Deck challenges. Iron Deck is a YouTube, now tournament organizer, like YouTube channel, now tournament organizer. There used to be still is something called the Iron Deck Challenge, wherein people will get together and play best 2 of 3 cEDH, which I think is a fascinating format that I wish could be explored a little more, but it is totally logistically impractical because you have to play cEDH games until someone has won 2 of them.
It's very time consuming.
Yes. And then he's done, the people who run Iron Deck have run a couple of these events. Like one of them was for an All Hallows Eve, and Mod won that. And one of them was for, I believe, a Wheel of Fortune, and I forget who won that one. But eventually
that was Koval, because that was the one I was in as well. And then there's been one more of them, I think, that was on YouTube.
Yeah, and there was one more of them that was like for a sword. There was one of them was for a sword. You could win a sword. And then that went over so well that Iron Deck was like, oh, I guess we just give away swords now. And so Iron Deck was a sponsor of this event. Iron Deck is going to start running their own events or continue like co-branding events. And then whenever Top Deck is involved, a big chunk of the price support will be you get to take home a sword.
I didn't know about them branching out into like, I knew that they were sponsoring this event, but I didn't know that this was going to be like an endeavor.
They're
now.
going
That's
to like
cool.
continue sponsoring events, which is fun. Which is very fun.
I think like
they were very hype about
things like that on the line is like extremely fun, and like I think that makes the format better.
Yeah, like there's like, you know, ooh, yeah, I won a trophy. Cool. That is very cool. Oh, I won some cash. Great. I mean, like, especially in a lot of these events, if you take first place, you win like your share, like, you know, the top 4 splits up like $3,000 or whatever. That is by no means any amount of money to cough at, right?
Yeah.
But a sword? Come on. I want to win a sword.
Exactly.
Actually.
Yeah. There are many tournaments that you can go to. And this is actually, if you're not a cEDH player and you're listening to this podcast, this is something that more people should know about. It is extremely easy to go to a competition and win a dual land. This is something that anyone could do. We were just talking about this guy who hasn't been playing for more than a calendar year. You can go win yourself a sword. You can go win yourself a Badlands if you really want to. There's more and more firing off all the time. But yeah, I'm very, very hyped to introduce swords to the meta
to
of
the
prizes
prize
you can
pool.
win.
So I did terribly at the event, but I'm rusty. I've barely played Magic. I've barely played cEDH this year at all.
What were you
myself.
on? Were you on Nagila?
I was playing Nagila. Okay. Nagila kind of feels bad right now.
It's not my favorite to play at the moment for sure.
A lot of people just like to be like, oh, I happen to have mana and removal. I will randomly remove Nagila because she is the strongest commander in the game.
Yeah, it's like,
on this table, independent of any other context of how the game has gone. They're just like, well, I don't want to waste my mana. I'll just remove this Nagila right now. I'm just like, oh, okay.
It's like, unfortunately, usually not a bad call.
No,
there are certainly instances
not.
where like it is a game of using your resources very wisely, but it is very easy to lose to a Nagila. So,
yep. I mean, I'll hate him for doing it, but I don't think it's that wrong.
But I mean, that's why it's just not a great meta pick right now.
Yep. That's kind of how I feel about it. Like, it's a great 5-color deck, but even now I'm playing it and there's just some kind of how I always used to feel about playing Malcolm Tana. I'd just draw some hands and I'd be like, oh, the cards that I have to play in this deck because it's this deck sometimes out of context just look like the most unplayable junk. It's just like, oh, I drew a Derevi, but I can't cast Nagila anytime soon. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
So, anyways, cEDH has kind of become a bit stale for me on the whole, because even on like outside, even, you know, escaping the tournament stuff, I barely even play cEDH at a tournament level anymore. Going out on a Monday night to my local game store or hopping on a stream or whatever, not much changes anymore. And it's like not for lack of trying. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are out there trying new stuff, playing new decks, messing around with new commanders, but we just don't actually get anything anymore that's like uniquely powerful enough in the way that cEDH requires. Like MH3 has come and gone, and the only cEDH staples in it are like the dual lands, the MDFC spells, and people are trying to make Nadu a thing, and there's like a couple other role players, but
yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of pieces for niche decks in the set, but nothing groundbreaking and nothing that really pushes the envelope so much forward.
It's like, oh, all of these X smaller decks got 2 new cards.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, Magda got some cool toys. Shout out to the Magda fans of the world.
For sure.
But yeah, nothing super groundbreaking. It has been I don't want to say exactly stagnant, but it certainly hasn't progressed in the way that like cEDH used to progress over the course of like 12 or 18 months. And I think it is indicative of where the meta has gotten to with the amount of people who are like working on building decks and the quality of the players who are playing them and shaping these decks. I think that we've like gotten closer to solving a lot more things than used to be true when the format was primarily run by like 19-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And part of it too is that just like since, you know, even since we started playing like Theros Beyond Legends, Theros Beyond Death happened, and Commander Legends happened. I think Commander Legends is the last really big like flip of the format that we've had.
I'd say partners. So
yeah, partners. Jeweled Lotus really kind of like narrowed the band of what commanders are super attractive to play, just because Jeweled Lotus is like so much better at casting some commanders than others. And the other really big change was like Born Upon a Wind did make specific turbo decks have like a way different game plan than they used to. Like Born Upon a Wind really changed up some turbo strats, but beyond that, we're just kind of hanging out. We're just kind of chilling.
Yeah, it certainly didn't
a little
reinvent
stale
the wheel
for me.
Like those turbo decks. It just gave them a better avenue to win with Necropotence.
Yep, exactly. It's just like, okay, you probably are already supposed to be playing Necropotence, but what if your Necropotence was like actually a game-winning spell on the turn you cast it? Ooh.
It's pretty attractive.
Without having to play Shimmer Mirror or whatever.
Oh no. Zerfan's getting caught in the crossfire.
Now Zer can just Born Upon a Wind.
And the new otter. There's a Flash Otter now, too.
Hey, the new Flash Otter from Bloomborough is pretty sick. And talking about Bloomborough, it's time for the Product Watch.
Product Watch.
Welcome to the Product Watch, the part of the show where we talk about the newest Magic the Gathering products that are coming out, have come out, are going to come out, are being previewed, have been teased, all that kind of stuff. There's almost always something for us to talk about in this segment, and this week is no different. Bloomborough previews are underway, and I gotta say, I'm struggling to kind of like read cards. I'm like specifically burnt out on spoiler season right now, which is kind of new for me. But I have loved just like looking at all of these cards. The Bloomborough as a world, as a plane, is the first thing in a minute for Magic that has felt kind of like delightful in a new way to me. I'm like, oh, they're doing something fun and different. And like, granted, cutesy animal stuff is by no means an original idea, right? But this is definitely something different for Magic than we have seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And it is going to be a refreshing breath of fresh air before we delve back into 80s horror slop references and a literal Marvel set. So,
yeah. I honestly think the strength of this is that it is not a completely new idea. Like, I've said it many times. The reason why I love Magic is because I love like classic 80s, 70s fantasy style art. Yeah, and this is a great return to center on that front because so much of the art is just fantastic. I'm feeling the same way. I'm loving looking at the cards. I'm not reading many of them. When people tell me what they say, I'm blown away, and I can't believe how strong Magic cards are in 2024.
Yeah, some of them are pretty cool.
Yeah. Someone was telling me about some red copy thing last night. It doesn't matter. The cards are very powerful. But yeah, it seems to be a really great set. I feel the same way. I think this is going to be like, I don't know. I feel so beat over the head sometimes with certain Magic sets. I have been on the don't read Magic cards train for a long time because the hive mind of the internet is much better at
it'll just serve up what you need
than I am. Yeah. And two, it's just information overload. You know, I have a better time when I have more mental space to devote to other things besides Magic commons in a set that doesn't matter. Certainly.
So, there's a lot of rabbits, squirrels, frogs, fun little environments. They're in collector boosters. They're doing like fun, oh, what if this Planeswalker was in Bloomborough type of treatments for Planeswalker cards, basically turning all of your favorites into furries.
So this is why we have Furry Jace pre-con? This isn't a collector booster?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
I was kind of blown away at the idea that they had put like an alt art Furry Jace in a pre-con.
No, these are just like only, much like this. They may also be openable in play boosters, much like the special guest slot and that kind of stuff, but they may be collector booster only. Dan, I need your live reaction to the card image that I just sent you in Discord.
All right, cool.
I'm hoping you haven't seen this yet.
Why does he look like that?
Is this describes to the audience what you're seeing? Yes, they showed this off today.
Okay, I'm looking at Karn the Great Creator. This is a new alternate art of it, and he's a tree. He looks like the Deku tree, but I don't understand why. Why would he be a tree?
So I don't know. I think this is just like part of they're like, well, there's obviously not robots. So what would like a sentient being, like a sentient living being in Bloomburrow be? He's a talking tree. He's a talking magical tree.
Okay, so the set marker here is imagine : critters. So okay,
yes.
that makes more sense than just looking at it.
So yes, that's the newest like reimagining of a planeswalker for Bloomburrow. They showed up today, Karn the Great Creator as a magical tree, which I personally found to be very funny. I wanted to give a quick rundown of the mechanics that they're showing off in Bloomburrow because I really like some of them. I'm going to run through all of them. There's a lot of them too. The first one, and I think the most interesting one, is Offspring. There's a lot of creatures that have Offspring, which is like when this creature enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 additional mana, generic, and if you do, you get to make a 1/1 copy of the creature. That's really cool. My favorite design of this they've shown off so far is a 3-drop dark, flying Dark Confidant. So you reveal the top card of your library on the beginning of your upkeep, put it in your hand, lose life equal to the cost of the card you revealed, but it has Offspring. So you can have 2 Dark Confidants. Both of them are flying. One of them's a 1/1. One of them is like a 2/3. Very cool design.
It is very fun. If you are a person who has never played with Dark Confidant before, this is like the first thing that will ever come up as you're playing is, do I cast the second Dark Confidant? So yeah, just stapling 2 onto one body. Very, very funny. I enjoy that very much.
But it's a very cute idea for a mechanic. I really like it both like flavorfully and functionally. It's like, pay a little more mana, you get another copy of this creature that probably has some kind of powerful effect or a powerful keyword or what have you, but it's just a little 1/1. It's a little baby. Very cute, very fun. Another major mechanic is gift. Gifting is pretty much only on instants and sorceries, I believe. And they say like gift your opponent a card or gift a fish. And what that means is when you cast the spell, you have the option to gift target opponent whatever is listed on the card, be it a fish, which means they get a tapped 1/1 fish token, or a card, which is they draw a card. And then if you do that, your spell gets more powerful. Another pretty simple and clean design that I like quite a lot. I think it's just kind of neat. It's like, you can draw a card and I get a way more powerful version of my spell. I give you what probably will be an inconsequential token type and I get a more powerful spell. I did see someone point out there's like a pretty good like a bounce creature spell with upside that's also gift a fish. And someone was like, and it's like cheap. And someone was like, this will just be really good in Oath of Druids in Legacy.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Oath of Druids, of course, being an enchantment where on each upkeep, if whoever's turn it is, if their opponent has more creatures than whoever's turn it is, you get to flip top cards of your library until you find a creature and you put it into play. Oath of Druids decks, of course, abuse this by not playing anything except for really big creatures. Their opponent inevitably plays one. You get to insert huge billion creature here. But you
usually
can force the issue.
I think these days.
Often, as with all reanimate or put in a really cool card or decks, it's just Atraxa these days. But historically, in the past, like a good way to beat the Oath of Druids players, like wait and not cast your creatures, or to like remove their Oath of Druids or overwhelm them really quickly. But now the Oath of Druids player can just like force the issue by being like, you get a fish. You have a tapped 1/1. I get an Atraxa on my turn. Thank you. Yeah,
generally that kind of function is pretty much contained to having 4 copies of Forbidden Orchard in your deck, which when you tap it for mana, gives your opponent a 1/1 spirit. But it's only the 4 copies of that you really have. There's not a lot of...
there's not much other stuff in that
You're not going to play Pact of the Titan, I guess I'll tell you that.
Target player gets a 4/4. Got him! And I died to this. It has like the largest upkeep cost. You have to like pay 5 for it or something.
I want to say Pact of the Titan is 5, but I can't quite remember.
It's so funny. There is a small cycle of classes returning. Class, you may remember, is a series of enchantments originally from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set. You play it. It's like an enchantment. It has a small effect. You can pay a certain amount of mana to like level it up, and then it has another effect, and then you can pay more mana, and then it levels up to its final level, and it has some other effect as well. Cute to see these return. And they're like, oh, I'm a painter, and a whole bunch of cute stuff like that, and that's fun. That's just neat. There is another very small mechanic and like mythic cycle called Seasons, which uses a self-contained resource system. It's like you can spend up to X paw symbols when casting this spell, and then there's different modes for the spell that each costs a certain amount of like 1 paw or 2 paws or 4 paws, and you can select any combination of modes any number of times equal to however many paws you want to spend. It's kind of like multi-kicker, not even multi-kicker for spells. It's
more like those memes where it's like build the perfect concert and they have the different bands listed at different prices.
These are weird. They're fun. It's obvious that they like thought it was a cool idea because they kept it in here, but not a cool enough idea such that they like, put it out beyond just a mythic cycle, 1 for each color.
Yeah, it seems like something that if you put it on too many of the cards, I think it very easily becomes too much. It would become like I think this is probably like the perfect touch of it.
Yeah. Yep. Moving past that as well, we also have Forage, which is more of like it's more of like a shortcut word for a cost. Anything where it says to forage, it's like an additional cost where you can either exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrifice a food. Fun, cute, flavorful. Past that, we have another like real mechanic, or I guess maybe a flavor word. It is expend. It cares about how much mana you spend. For example, a lot of them have like expend 4 or similar, where on the when you spend your 4th mana of the turn, there's like a triggered ability, and then one of the example cards, it's like a common, and when you expend 4, which is to say spend your 4th mana of the turn, you gain 3 life. This is like, it might be a little annoying to track, but this seems like a real like obvious mechanic that I'm kind of surprised we haven't gotten before.
It is very simple. We've seen, like, I guess, a sort of variation on it with some of the monocolored sets. I want to say maybe Dominaria.
They cared about if you spent a certain amount of similar colored mana or not. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this is the first time we've uniquely seen it where it's just the amount of mana that you have spent over a turn. And I agree. I think maybe you've hit on why we haven't seen it before, in that it is like not the most intuitive thing to track for newer players, but they certainly trust newer players more and more as time goes on, which they should. And yeah, I think it's a fun mechanic. It seems like something that's very easily to push overboard, so I don't think those effects could be too strong, but it's very cool.
And it is kind of neat too, because like the mechanic itself cares about the total mana you've spent on your turn, not the amount of mana that you spent. Like your cards with expend will look retroactively as well. So if you have like a 3-drop with expend 4, and then you cast a 2-drop, your expend 4 permanent that you just cast will still trigger, which is neat. And then finally, the remaining major mechanic, and it is a pretty big mechanic in the set, is Valiant. It is very similar to a mechanic that older players may be familiar with, Heroic, which heroic creatures would trigger when they were like targeted by spells, when you triggered them with spells. Valiant is more complicated. Heroic, whenever you target this creature with a spell or ability, very relevant, not just spells, also abilities you control, creatures with Valiant will trigger whatever their Valiant ability is, and they can only be triggered once per turn. I wish they had just done that on Nadu, let's be real. I did see like some little speculation from people that like Nadu may have originally been like a Valiant design that got shifted over into the MH3 card file and tweaked a little bit, but that seems like slightly unlikely to me. But it is a very similar design space. It just says twice per turn instead of only once per turn. Boo! All of your creatures get super valiant. Is literally what Nadu says.
It's coming.
Yeah, I mean,
what did they call the big evolve? You get evolve plus a counter?
it was Morph and Megamorph.
Okay, so yeah, we'll get Mega.
Yeah, Megamorph, of course, just being like morph, but when you unmorph them, you get a +1/+1 counter. That was a fascinating tale in like Magic design. Because like Rosewater has gone on the record to say that like that like mechanic is actually super solid and has like a lot of cool gameplay potential and all of that kind of stuff, but he just desperately wishes they had found another name for it, because like Megamorph just like killed it out of the gate.
Yes,
because you look at Megamorph and you're just like, oh, they just, okay, getting real inventive here. But if they had been able to find some other name for it, people probably would have been like, oh, they made like Morph a little bit better. This is so cool and interesting. But since there was like so on the nose, everyone was like, boo, this sucks.
No, genuinely, it's great because, of course, as time goes on, like there's better and better synergies for having a +1/+1 counter, or any kind of counter actually now on your creature. But yeah, Megamorph didn't do it.
So that is all the mechanics of Bloomburrow. Any closing thoughts about this upcoming Magic the Gathering set, Dan?
I hadn't heard of Valiant actually, but I think that's a lot better than Heroic. I think Heroic is actually a dog shit mechanic. It requires too much of your deck to be built around it, where like this works much better for a limited environment. There's so many things that just coincidentally trigger your objects.
Adding on the abilities is really what sets it off to the stratosphere.
Yes,
like it's like if you look at Nadu, if Nadu had a heroic variant, it would be infinitely worse. Because it's so good because you can target your stuff with equip abilities and Sylvan Safekeeper abilities and all of that. So,
yeah.
All right. So, Bloomburrow, that is our one bit for the product watch. And we will now move on to the final segment of the show, the co-host notebook.
Product watch.
Dan, you are our only co-host today. I'm internalizing already what you're going to say. I am relaxing. I'm feeling peaceful. Dan, what is in your co-host's notebook for this episode?
I have actually spent less time.
Oh, brother! My heart rate just spiked.
It's been extremely hot in the city of Philadelphia. Last week, though, I got out to the nature preserve. That was nice. There's a new record store by me. I don't know if I've told you about this yet.
I don't think you have.
No. Oh, my gosh.
Or is it like the one that's like someone's house?
Yes.
And they just have a bunch of sick stuff? Yeah, you mentioned that last episode.
Okay, yeah. I went back and I bought a record that was way too expensive because it was my birthday next week. And I was like, no, I deserve it.
Happy birthday to me.
Very much so. But yeah, bought some cool records. Had a good 4th of July weekend. I haven't been up to a whole lot, honestly. Nose to the grindstone, working a lot. Trying not to die of heat exhaustion.
What was the record that you spent way too much on?
I bought Themby by Pharaoh Sanders. It was an original pressing from 1971. You want to take a guess? And I'll also tell you that a man wrote his name in permanent marker on both the cover and the disc. But the disc is in good condition.
Yeah, does it sound great?
It does sound really good. Yeah, I only listened to the A side so far, but it sounded great. It was a little bit fuzzy towards the end of it, but it sounded really good.
That'll just happen. That'll just happen.
You're looking it up. You're cheating right now.
I'm looking at the album art.
Okay,
which is very funny.
It is.
Him in a little hat.
It is simply Pharaoh Sanders playing a little flute on the ocean shore.
I'm just going to guess $80.
Right on the nose. You got it.
Oh, okay. I did not look that up. I thought I was lowballing you. I thought I was setting you up to be like, actually, no, it was 140.
No, I don't have that kind of money to spend on records.
No, that's very fair. No, $80 is still a whole lot for a record. That's awesome.
It's one of my favorite records of all time. I'd probably put it in my top 5,
I know you're
honestly.
A huge Pharaoh Sanders fan.
Yes, so. Very bigly. I need to stop saying bigly because I think that is a Donald Trump quote, and that is the reason why I say it.
Welcome, trumpeters.
But yeah, I haven't been up to a whole lot else, honestly. I taught a person how to play Magic, and that went pretty well. We've moved on to 2-color decks now. I taught her originally with the starter decks that they don't make anymore that you used to be able to get it like an LGS. I have a couple from 2020 still left over. But we upgraded to the Lord of the Rings starter decks, and it was infinitely more complicated, but went well.
Hey, I'm so glad.
Yeah, we got another one on hook.
Was that the one that you taught, and she immediately was like, "Oh, I get it. I'm supposed to attach emotions to all of these game pieces."
Yes, she immediately fell in love with the common from M20 Feral Abomination that is a 6-mana 5/5 with Death Touch.
And that's all it does?
Yeah, it's just a Thrall with Death Touch. But
that is like one of the magic bits of playing Magic early on that I do really miss. I was talking to Murph in the episode in the interview that will be airing momentarily, actually, about like our first big rares and that kind of stuff that made us go like, whoa, that's so cool. And for me, it was like omniscience. So like from M13, because I started around RTR block, right? But that wasn't like the first Magic card that I fell in love with. The first Magic card that I fell in love with for like no good reason whatsoever, really, was just Runewing. Which is just like a common bird from RTR. Let me read it to you.
I don't know this one.
It's 3 and a blue, 2/2 flying. When it dies, it draws a card.
That's great.
For me, I was just like, whoa, I can attack. What are they going to do? Are they going to block my flyer? I draw a card. Idiot.
Absolutely.
You fool.
You absolute moron. Learn to play.
Exactly. Or it's just like very similarly when I started playing, once Gatecrash came out, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but when Gatecrash came out, they printed High Priest of Penance, which is like a Orzhov 1/1. When High Priest of Penance is dealt damage, you may destroy target non-land permanent.
Yeah, unbeatable.
So I'm like, how can I ever attack?
Yeah.
I can't attack in this game of Magic anymore. This is no fair.
Mine was a Simic Sky Swallower.
Oh,
6/6
yeah.
flying Shroud
6/6
Trample
flying Shroud
for
Trample,
5
whatever.
and Simic mana. It just like, it tramples, it flies, you can't target it with anything. What are you going to do? You're going to die. That's the answer to that question.
Oh, wow. I haven't thought about that card in a second. I should put that in my all Simic deck.
It's very funny because a friend of mine introduced me to Tron because they had a modern Tron deck, and I was like, oh, I'll know what I'll do with these Tron
all
lands.
this mana, Simic Sky Swallower. Yeah. How do you beat that? You can't even remove it. Come on.
I couldn't afford a Karn Liberated, but Simic Sky Swallower, 50 cents.
50 cents. Now, I mean, in this new modern era, you can put this new Karn, the Great Creator, who's a little tree in there. It'll just be a great deck all coming together. Really quickly, I have something to talk about today. That's not Magic the Gathering.
The host's notebook.
Yeah, the host's notebook. Emma usually tries to bully me into talking about something. So now that Emma isn't here, I'll talk about something.
I certainly don't care. I'm not going to ask you.
Exactly. I bought the final 2 GameCubes I needed for my GameCube collection. So
yeah, congrats.
My GameCube collection is now effectively done. I bought the Star. I bought the Pearl White, which is a very cute little pearlescent white color. It looks beautiful in person. And also Starlight Gold from Japan. Both of them are colors that look like way better in person than they do over camera, which is rough, but it now makes me so much happier that I own them now. I put them off to the end because I was like, white and cheap gold plastic, who cares? But like in person, the gold is actually like a very nice, a little bit sparkly, like closer to champagne color almost.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And it looks incredibly nice. And then the white is like very nicely pearlescent and has a very nice effect when you look at it from different angles. But
are they both Japanese models or only the pearlescent one?
The pearlescent white one is from Europe, actually.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It was sold in Europe. Yep. There is a pearlescent white one also from Japan, but it's way, way, way more pearlescent. And they only made 150 of them, and it was included in a very rare Final Fantasy Chronicles bundle. That's one of the true unobtainium cubes because it has a real like crossover of being rare since there's like only 150 of them. a special edition that's actually connected to something in demand, aka Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
And they look incredible. So like if
Yeah,
you like
that's
any
the
of
huge
those
bummer,
three things, it's just like it has 3 knocks, like it has like 3 things individually that make it collectible for different people or as a whole. So they are very expensive. So I'll probably never own one.
But you do have the one of the 1 of 50 Heineken cubes.
I do have a 1 in 50 cube. The problem with that one, not a problem. It's very cool. It's very rare, but all it is, it's very rare.
Yeah.
There is 50 of them. Therefore, it is very rare, which makes it very cool to specific people. But not many people are that into Heineken. And many people who are that into Heineken probably aren't into the GameCube. So
this is problematic because I myself am a sucker for like old Vice advertisements, like old beer advertising and old cigarette advertising. I think it's so cool. I guess just because you're not allowed to really do it anymore, I think it's a very fun, like, old style of advertising. But yeah, like Heineken Cube, I think is so great. We have to drink a Heineken out of it together sometime.
Out of the Heineken Cube?
Yeah.
Fine. I am going to take it off consignment soon. My Heineken Cube is currently on consignment. I was trying to make a little money off of it, but
I'll give you $1 for it.
I'll just bring it back. Can you like times that by like 2,000?
No.
Dang it. All right, Dan, do you have anything to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, follow me on YouTube, follow me on Twitch, Moderately Anonymous MTG on all the platforms, all the social media websites. Go to your local library, invest some of your time there. In the summertime, especially, it's a great place for people who don't have another place to hang out to be cool, and it's one of the last few places that you can do that for free on Earth. So give your local library money. It's a good way to spend your money and time.
Yes, one of the very few, if not only, for a great many people remaining third spaces where you can simply exist for free.
Yeah.
Holy gas. Well, thank you for listening to the Herald's Horn podcast. This half of it, at least, if you want us to talk about what you want us to talk about, send us a letter. Send a letter to the editor, editorial@heraldshorn.com. Coming up, we have a great interview with one Josh Murphy of the Command Zone, talking about how he got hired by the Command Zone, how he started playing Magic, and what it's like trying to make stories out of EDH games as now the director of game nights. Thanks so much for listening. It's going to be great.
Bye.
Hey there. Thanks for listening to this podcast episode. If you want to help support the podcast, check out our Patreon. You'll get a sticker in the mail and access to our Patreon exclusive content, which I'm always cooking up more of every day. We've got bonus questions with guests, exclusive interviews, me thought dumping about Magic in my life. What else could you want? Plus, when we read letters to the editors, those sent through Patreon DMs or the Discord get first priority. Yep, we have a Discord that you'll be thrown into. Come talk to me about professional wrestling. Anyways, without any further ado, let's get back into this episode. And welcome back. Today I am joined by somebody who I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the work of, whether or not you know it. Today I am joined by Josh Murphy, better known around the internet as Murph, the other Josh around the Command Zone. Murph, thank you for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I very rarely get to talk to you in a podcast format, Cal.
Yes, exactly. This is the fun episode where I get to have Murph on, who is the co-host of, we make a podcast together called Level Up, where we talk about retro video games. You heard about it because it was probably advertised at the top of this episode. But yes, we talk to each other quite a bit now. But the rule on Level Up is that we try to talk about Magic the Gathering as little as possible.
We said zero when we started, and we are doing a very bad job at that.
Well, it's an easy thing for us to draw conclusions from. We're like, this is just like in Magic and that it's really easy to do that.
We use that as a very constant frame of reference because it's always just been such a big part of our lives.
Yes, exactly.
So we try to avoid it on that, not because we don't like it, but because we do Magic stuff elsewhere.
It defines most of the rest of our life.
Exactly,
yes, exactly. Especially for you, who do it full time, which is part of what we are going to talk about today. Murph, let us start the conversation where all of these conversations must start. How did you get into Magic the Gathering? What was your early history with the game?
So my first Magic experience, I basically got into the game around when I think like 50% of all the people that you've asked this question also say is around Return to Ravnica block.
Yep, same
that seems
as me.
to be exactly. That seems to be a really big place that a lot of people ended up getting in. That seemed to draw a lot of people in. So the reason that I got into the game was because I was in Boy Scouts at the time and a church Bible study at the time.
Another classic. Like the Boy Scouts pipeline is also huge.
It's true. Yeah. So I was in Boy Scouts at the time and my church Bible study were both trying to learn this game, Magic the Gathering. And I was like, hey, if I learn this one game, I can hang out with two groups of people at once. That's a no-brainer. Of course I'm going to learn a game that seems ostensibly interesting and fun. So why not? So we started off, I started off playing with probably the worst way to start playing, which was the Izzet versus Golgari commander deck. Or not commander deck, the dual deck.
Oh, dual deck? Yeah.
And I learned how to play Magic with Dredge.
That's tough. That's tough. And like the Izzet deck's kind of weird too. Like
the Izzet deck is pretty funky.
Yeah.
The Golgari deck, like trying to understand Dredge as a mechanic of a replacement effect, like trying to teach a new player what a replacement effect is. Not a great way to teach a player. I'm honestly astounded that I am even still
here
playing
today.
the game today.
Yeah.
After that introduction.
No, that totally makes sense.
But yeah, we just kept playing. After it was not even a month, we kind of discovered Commander, and that kind of became our go-to in basically all my friend groups at the time, where we just made Commander decks, played Commander. And that was in specifically Dragon's Maze was about to come out is when I first started, because I remember a friend invited me to a pre-release for Dragon's Maze, and I was like, I don't know. I don't think I'm good enough to be able to go to like an event or something. So I didn't. So M14 ended up being my first
maybe
pre-release.
dodged something with that one.
Perhaps dodged a bullet. Yeah, because Dragon's Maze, not that good of a set.
Not a good set. Not a good set at all.
I have a lot of fond memories of specific Dragon's Maze cards, but as a whole, Dragon's Maze was not a very
because
good
I mean,
set.
like if it's right around the time when you were starting playing, then I assume that may have been an outsized part of your collection and reference for the game for some point in time.
Yeah, basically my entire collection at that time was a bunch of commons from Mirrodin block, Scar's Mirrodin block specifically, as well as some Innistrad commons, and then whatever I opened from Return to Ravnica, Gatecrash / Dragon's Maze. So, yeah.
So a lot of Dragon's Maze. I'm sure they were the cheapest packs available at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I went and bought basically whatever I could.
Yes.
I still have the very first pack I ever opened, which was M13. I kept the packaging. It's in a closet behind me elsewhere. I'd get it out if this were a video podcast, but
it's not. Yeah,
it's not.
Maybe one day. Maybe one
but
day.
I promise I have it. I don't know why I bothered to keep it. I kind of probably in the back of my mind knew that this game was something special and that I might like want to have something like that later on down the line just to look back on. Turns out I was right. Though.
Yeah, that is really cool. I wish I had the first pack I ever opened was from Gatecrash.
Yeah.
So I wish I still had that around. I don't even remember what rare I opened though. Do you remember what the first like rare you opened was?
Yep, Spelltwine.
Oh, brother.
It's a fun card. It's a cool card.
It is an exceedingly cool card. It's an exceedingly cool card.
M13 had a bunch of exceedingly cool cards. Like when I saw Omniscience, definitely. I think my mind just kind of exploded.
Omniscience was the first rare that like blew my mind. Omniscience was like the first Magic card that I was obsessed with, and it was basically because of like M13.
The first Magic card that blew my mind was Wormcoil Engine, specifically because in my pack of bulk, I had a Phyrexian Hulk, which was a 6-mana 5/4 vanilla. And when I first started playing,
how can you get more powerful than this?
Exactly. I was like, okay, there are some green creatures that are more powerful than this. Like, I understood that at the time, but I had that. And I was like, this can go in any deck, even my blue or black decks or something like that. And that's a pretty big beater. That's a great card. So I had like played it, put in some of my all commons draft chaff decks when I first started playing. And then a friend showed me Wormcoil Engine, and for the exact same mana cost, it did so much more. 6/6 stat line, Death Touch, and Lifelink. When it died, make a Death Touch, make a Lifelink, and I was just in love. I was like, this is the best card ever. I got to get me one ASAP. And I didn't because it was $30 at the time, and I was not about to spend $30 on a single card when I could barely spend money on packs at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So you found Commander very quick, you said.
Yes.
And then the rest is history, right?
Yeah, it was mostly the Boy Scouts had started doing Commander stuff pretty quickly because they had bought like OG Commander precons. And then the C13 Commander precons started coming out. And so then we all started like delving a little bit into Commander with other friend groups. And it was when Theros came out that I had opened an Erebos God of the Dead. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll make an actual Commander deck from scratch. And so I had my very first deck was a mono black Erebos God of the Dead deck that has evolved into a Chainer Dementia Master deck that I still have.
You still have it to this day?
It probably shares like 3 cards from that original iteration. I don't even know if it shares 3 cards. Maybe like 1.
But the lineage is there.
Yes, the lineage is definitely there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super cool. So obviously, have you ever really like left the EDH scene, or has that just pretty much always been your interaction with Magic?
I mean, that's always been the primary interaction. I love Limited. I'll go to pre-releases as often as I can. I'll do drafts as often as I can. I always love Cube. If anyone's ever like, hey, you down for some Cube? I'm always down for some Cube. The
answer is yes.
Yes, Vintage Cube, so much fun. Popper Cubes, whatever. I love battle boxes. Dan's a ton of fun. Basically any type of Magic that I can get my hands on, I love. Yep. Constructed Magic, I even delved into for a little bit. I tried some RTR Theros Standard at the time. Never did well, but had a blast doing it. And then I did end up playing Modern in like the 2017, 2018 era. Mm-hmm. Basically, once Jace the Mind Sculptor got unbanned, I'm like, guys, I can play Jace the Mind Sculptor in Modern.
Jace the Mind Sculptor in Modern, and then you very quickly realized, oh, Jace the Mind Sculptor is only okay in Modern. Oh, brother.
It took me way too long to figure that out and lost plenty of games on my way there. But
I mean, hey, it's fun.
Yeah, so I played a blue-black control brew of my own volition, my own little brew. And once again, it barely won games, but I had a ton of fun doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. But hey, now you play a whole lot of Commander. I think we can shift to the part where somehow, along the way, you ended up working full-time in Magic the Gathering, something not very many people get to do outside of the building at Wizards of the Coast. How did you come to be the first full-time editor in the building at Command Zone?
I wasn't the first full-time
not the first
editor.
Okay, I thought you were the first. I didn't do enough background research on my own co-host. My apologies.
I'm the longest... whoever has been there the longest currently in the building, that person is me.
Okay. We longest tenured, exactly. non-OG Josh.
Yeah. If you go and watch the behind the scenes episode that we did for game nights, by we, I mean, I wasn't working there at the time. So I'm not in that at all. But we had another editor named Terry who worked there. He had edited the podcast for a very long time and then worked there all the way up to, I think, 2019-ish. Did a little bit of freelance stuff for us past that, but ended up moving to Northern California with his fiance. So hopefully they're doing great. But yeah, anyway.
That makes sense.
So as far as I'm concerned, it was... Here's the story, all right? So... I had watched and liked the Command Zone.
Yep.
And I had liked and watched just Magic content in general. And so I was planning on going to Grand Prix Las Vegas 2018 with some friends. So we were going to go Friday after work. We were just going to all hop in a car, drive to Vegas, get there a little bit later in the evening, and then spend all Saturday at the con, and then a little bit of Sunday at the con, and then go home on like... Sunday at 1 or something, try to beat some of the traffic. Because there's always traffic coming back out of Vegas, coming back to California area.
Especially on a Sunday.
On a Sunday, yes. Specifically on Sundays. So I had signed up for the Modern event, which was on Saturday, going into a little bit of Sunday. So I was like, whatever. If I make the cuts to day 2, then I'll figure out how to get home. It's fine. I know I'm not very good at this, but I at least want to try it, you know?
But just in case.
Exactly. So then on Thursday, the day before the Friday evening that we were going to leave, I looked some stuff back up and I realized that I had gotten my dates wrong. The Modern events started on Friday.
Oh.
And was 3 days long, not 2 days.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So the event that I had signed up and already paid money for was on a day that I wasn't going to be there. So what would you do in this case, Cal?
Well, I would immediately quit my job and drive to Las Vegas to make sure that no, I'm kidding.
No.
I'd try to make it, just in case.
Yeah. But I figured this out on the Thursday. So I couldn't really
not exactly time to take
the evening of Thursday.
Time off or or get a different ride, figure out how else you're supposed to get there.
Yeah. So what I did instead was, thankfully I did not have work the next day. So
perfect.
I got in my car at 3 a.m. and drove to Las Vegas.
At 3 a.m.?
At 3 a.m.
Sir?
Because there just wasn't really any other option. Like, it was either the evening it currently was when I figured this out, and then figure out some place to stay, which I couldn't really do on such short notice, or just wake up early and go and do it. And so I chose the latter, just wake up early and go there. So I woke up at 3, got in my car, drove to Vegas, ended up hitting multiple freeway closures and a ton of traffic. So
getting in, just like at early rush hour accidentally.
Yeah, it took me like 5-ish hours to get there. Usually it's about a 4-ish hour drive, a little more than 5 hours. And so I barely get there in time for everything to open. I just rush in. I haven't eaten breakfast or anything. I just go and register for the events, say I'm here, sit down. I'm like exhausted at this time, but I get to the events and then the event starts and I go 0-1. Okay, well, sucks.
Well, great way to start.
Great way to start. But it ended up going long, that game. So I had no time in between that and then the next rounds to get food.
Any breakfast, yeah.
Yeah. So then I went to round 2 and then did a bunch of same grinding, very slow games, ended up losing that one as well. So I was 0-2 to start the day. Not great. I was very tired, very hungry. And so finally, I scramble and go and grab some food. And then I'm just waiting for the next one to start.
Nice little convention center hot dog for you.
Oh, it was not good food, that's for sure. So I go and I sit down and wait for the next round to start. Wait for the next round to start. Wait for the next round to start. Becomes 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour and a half. 2 hours go by.
I was about to say, I know the tale of this event.
Yes.
I've heard how this Modern event went. Yes.
So this
not from you.
Oh, really?
This specific Modern event.
Yep. So
historically bad.
What ended up happening was their pairing systems broke. And so they said after about 2 hours, hey, we're trying to get it fixed. We're going to have to do a bunch of stuff manually by hand. It's probably going to take another hour. If you want to, you can come to the desk, get a full refund, and drop out of the tournament, no questions asked. And I'm like, I'm 0-2 and I'm so dead tired. I'm going to
give me my money back.
Give me my money back. So then I went up to the desk, got my money back, and then went to the outside of the hall, found like a bench, and just kind of collapsed.
Just like, well, all of this for nothing.
All of this for nothing. Like I was pretty defeated, pretty dejected. And then I wandered the hall a little bit when I woke up and just kind of hung around the hall until it closed. The problem with this is that my buddies weren't actually getting in until later in the evening. So the hall closed and I had nowhere to go. So I was like, well, I'm stupid, tired, and exhausted, and there's nowhere really for me to go. And except for things on the strip, which is loud and annoying,
Yep.
Everything closes at like a weirdly early time in Vegas. Like you think that's even things around the strip would stay open later. They don't.
Things are either open until like 8 p.m. or they're open all 24 hours, and there's like no in between at all.
Yeah.
If not earlier than 8 p.m.
It's very strange. So I did eventually find an In-N-Out that I was able to get to, and just kind of hung out at the In-N-Out. And I must have looked terrible because one of the workers there came up to me when I was sitting down, and she said, "Honey, are you okay?"
Oh man!
And in Vegas, if somebody comes up to you and asks if you're okay, you probably
in
look
Vegas
terrible.
of all places.
This wasn't too far.
The average person in Vegas off the strip or on the strip is going to look a little wrung out by default. But
yes,
I know I look wrung out when I'm in Vegas.
So my friends didn't actually get there until like midnight.
Yep.
And so eventually, finally at midnight, we could get into our hotel and just crash.
Yep.
So, all that being said, this is how I got to this event. Saturday was fun. Spent a bunch of time with friends on Saturday, just doing stuff. Sunday comes around, and it's almost 1 p.m. Everyone in our group is getting ready to go. And I see Josh Lee Kwai playing over on a table. I'm like, oh, I'd love to get in a game with Josh. I'll just kind of like hover around, hang around, and see if I can make that happen. And so I kind of hang around, and then one game wraps up, another game starts without me, and then Josh is like, I probably have time for one game after this, and then was like, you, and I was one of those people.
Yep.
Like, you can play after this one. But my friends were like, we're leaving now. And I said, I
was like, well, good thing I drove separately.
Well, I drove separately. I drove myself. So that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll just hang out, do this, grab a quick game, and then go.
Yep.
And so I did that. I played the game. The game itself, not very fun. Someone threw out like a Vorinclex. And
back in 2018, when that's about as bad as it could get to.
Yeah. So we all had a real rough time with it. And then JLK ended up with like a constant mists that he just kept looping, so none of us could really attack him. And so eventually he pulled out the win, but it was a little bit of a slog. And so I eventually got to talking with him, and I basically said, hey, I appreciate what you do. I like editing. I didn't even ask for anything. I just kind of like threw that out there of hey, maybe. I don't even know why I did that, honestly.
Hey, I mean, shoot your shot.
Exactly. Like, I had that always in the back of my mind, but I didn't say that overtly.
Yep.
And then Josh said, oh, you do editing? You like magic? We're looking for some help right now. Do you live in the Los Angeles area? And I'm like, I live in Orange County. Does that count? And he's like, are you willing to commute? And I'm like, yeah. And so he's like, all right, shoot me a message on Twitter and we'll get emailing back and forth. And I'm like, okay. So I followed him. He followed me back on Twitter. And so I walk out of that convention hall and just like fist bump the air. I'm just like, yes. Because I'm like, I have no idea if this is going to go anywhere. But that seemed really promising.
Like, wait, how do I get back in touch with him again?
Exactly. So I did reach out on Twitter. And he's like, okay, well, send me your email and your resume and stuff, and we'll be in touch. We'll see if we can make something work. And so I do. I send all that. And then a full month goes by before I hear back. And like a month is a long time without any correspondence. So I was just kind of like, yeah, maybe just nothing ended up happening. And so I was in between jobs at the time too. So I was like starting to look for other jobs as well during this time. And so Josh was eventually emailed me back and was like, hey, let's do like a phone call interview. And we did that. And eventually he was like, all right, well, let's do a trial period and we'll just see how you do. We need help with a podcast. And so that's what you'll be doing. And so I went there. I went to the old Command Zone studios in a house, and it was just me, Josh, and Terry, the other guy.
Well,
and then
the third editor
exactly
in the room.
That was it. Because Jimmy doesn't really edit or anything. He's a lot more like on-screen talent.
On-screen talent, and he does a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. He used to do more. Like he would do the color. He would do some of the audio processing. But we basically made it so that he doesn't have to do any of that anymore. But back then, that's about all he did as far as like post-production stuff. So it wasn't a ton. So he wasn't there doing post-production stuff every single day. He was doing like Feast of Fiction as well. He also had that show going on.
Man,
so he was busy doing other things as well. So he was there. He just wasn't in the command zone room, quote unquote.
Yep.
So yeah, went there and started doing things. And Josh was like, here's how you do things. Terry was like, here's how you do things. So they both helped get me up and running. Because when I said I like editing, I didn't actually know that much editing.
Yeah,
I'd taken one class at a college at the time.
I was about to say, this is the thing I remember about you telling me this story in the past was actually you were like, yeah, I love editing. And you had interacted with editing some,
ever so slightly. Like I tried making like the occasional YouTube video and stuff.
Yeah.
As well, which I've always enjoyed doing.
Yep.
But yeah, all I had done was taken like a single class and learned the very basics of editing in Final Cut Pro 10, I think it was. And so hopping over to Premiere with very little experience in editing, Josh likes to say, oh, he didn't even know what keyframes were. I knew what keyframes were, but I didn't know how Premiere as a program worked at all, because I had never experienced it. And was just not familiar enough with even Final Cuts to know what everything needed to be, like what all my functions needed to be. So I'll always let him say, I didn't even know what keyframes were at the time, because it just makes for a better story. But he can have that.
The truth comes out on this episode of the Harold Torna podcast. Murph tells the real tale of getting hired at the command zone.
Yeah. So I came in for a trial period, and they never told me to leave. So technically, I guess I'm still on my trial period.
Technically, yeah, exactly. Josh is going to sit you down in like a month from now and be like, well, Murph, you officially made it through your trial period.
Yeah.
And thanks for making it. We're gonna have to, we're gonna move forward with other options.
And the reason that the name Murph came about was because we had 3 people there, and 2 of them shared the same name.
Yeah, Josh,
which was a problem.
Yep.
And so after the first day, Josh was like, "All right, we got to call you something else. Like, what's your middle name?" And I'm like, "Boring, whatever." And he's like, well, how about your last name, Murph? Will that work? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I've been called that at like Boy Scouts and stuff before, so I'll always respond to that.
Yep.
And so it's actually been kind of a little bit of a blessing, because if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, Murph, what's up? I automatically know where I know you from.
Yeah. Actually, you know me from exactly the Command Zone podcast.
Exactly. Like,
and related.
It's still my name, but it's still kind of like a stage name, quote unquote. So it's actually been like kind of nice. So thanks, Josh, for doing that. Appreciate that.
You got your own. I imagine there's like actually a lot of people out there that don't know that your name is actually Josh. Also.
Yeah.
Like
the funny part,
I only figured that out because like eventually I finally paid attention to your Twitter @, which is also named Josh. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
The funny part is that I've had that Twitter handle since before working here.
What?
Just because I've had so many, like every single friend group that I've been a part of, there's always been another person with the same name as me. Mm-hmm. So I was basically always Joshes. Exactly. I was basically always the other Josh.
The other Josh.
That's how my Twitter handle kind of came about, and it just like fit in perfectly. And so I never changed it.
Yep. That makes sense. And now it works perfectly. Well, Murph, your trial period has continued on so long that you have gone from being like the third editor in the room that had to learn how Premiere worked to now you are very often, almost always now, the director for Game Nights episodes. And I think it would probably be fair to call Game Nights the premier product offering of Command Zone at this time. Of course, there's still the podcast. The podcast is still there. The podcast rocks. But Game Nights is the big, high budget production, gameplay, sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, etc., etc. And you are the man in the chair. Murph, what's it like being the man in the chair?
Difficult.
Understandable.
is the answer.
I imagine that's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, because you've got deadlines, and you have to meet those deadlines, and you are the one that has to make those deadlines work. Nobody else but you. If something goes awry, if there's a problem, sucks. We can't move the date. Like that's just not a thing that we can do.
Let me like step back this question really quick, actually. So, yes, when people watch Game Nights episodes, if they're paying attention to the intro, they'll see director. I assume it says Josh Murphy.
Yes.
It says Josh Murphy, but a lot of people may not know what that actually entails. Like, what does it entail being the director of a Game Nights episode? I think you were kind of already getting into that, but I wanted to reframe the question specifically in that direction.
Yeah. So it's always been a little bit funky and a little bit like kind of more nebulous for like me and Jake, who have been the other ones other than Josh to really direct Game Nights. Like we've kind of had to figure out a little bit of what that means.
what it is.
Because previously,
I assume for the longest time it was just like everything that Josh did was the director's job.
Exactly.
And then Jake directed some episodes, and now you're directing episodes, so it's been a process.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was always Josh did everything. So Josh played in the game. He always was like, oh, well, we need to redo this play. We need to get this little bit of audio or whatever. Because if the audience doesn't know, a lot of times in Game Nights, if something isn't said cleanly or isn't played out cleanly, we always want the card to be put out on an open space on the table. If you don't do that initially, that's fine. We'll just say, hey, can you pull that back and put it out into an open space on the table? And then we'll use that take for the finally edited video. So there's a lot of stuff like that ends up happening during the actual gameplay process itself that you just don't really think about, like who's making those decisions of whether we need to redo something or not. That's always something. The interview process with the cutaway heads is always probably the most complicated part of any Game Nights shoot, because you're trying to get people's legitimate reactions and thoughts, but also simultaneously try to craft a story around it.
Yeah, and you do those on separate days, right? You have like the gameplay shoot day, and then the next day you shoot the interviews, right?
No, so we do the interviews the same day for whatever the guest or guests are.
Okay,
and then we'll do all of our in-house people the next day, because usually it's helpful for people if they can do it on the same day.
Because it's freshest.
It's freshest, and even so, even if we play a game, break for lunch, and then come back and do these interviews, a lot of times people will be like, wait, what happened? Because they're long days.
Actually, I don't know.
Yeah, they're long days. I get it. And the games can oftentimes go quite long. And so trying to remember what you were thinking on turn 4 of a game that was like 5 hours ago, totally understandable if you don't remember. So we'll always write down like what happened in the game. Like we'll write down everybody's moves and stuff. And sometimes we'll even write out like, oh, this person was feeling this way.
Yeah, they said moment, this in the moment.
So that we can remind them of, hey, you looked angry at this time. Like, why were you thinking that? So we'll always do that. We affectionately refer to that as our script, because everyone always says,
as we all know, Game Nights is scripted. Yeah.
Technically, we have a transcript of the entire game. It's true. Yeah. So doing that is probably the most difficult part. And then trying to get everything to completion and just being able to make the hard calls. Like stuff with like VFX. Say we only have so much time to do something, and then one of our VFX people gets sick. Yeah, but we need these certain amount of shots. So what can you do about it? You have to do something about it, because you are not telling...
Murph gets into the VFX booth, baby.
No. I can't. I already have so much stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So...
you just have to solve all the problems.
Yeah, there's just so many problems that you have to solve. And these challenges just come up like pretty consistently. And so as the director, they are your job to not only figure out the problem, but to not just entirely take everything upon yourself and to use the resources that are available to you. Okay, well, if one of our VFX people are out... can somebody else come in and try to help out with something? Like I've had Gaurav, our ad guy, who also helps out with special projects and does like a ton of like miscellaneous stuff as well. Very, very good editor. I've come in and said, hey, Gaurav, I am not going to get these visual effects. Can you do something for these? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I've been like very impressed with the stuff that he's given back. And I'm like, awesome. If I didn't go to him and say, hey, I need help with this, and instead just threw up my arms and said, well, I guess there's nothing I can do. Like, that's a much better, like, the product at the very end of the day is all that matters. And so if you can make a good product at the end of the day with the resources that you have available to you, that's really all you're trying to do.
And that is, at the end of the day, now what your job is. So I want to key in a little bit something on what you said there earlier, making a story. What do you, and this is something you have kind of said in passing in conversations that we've had too about your job and, you know, what you're working on and that kind of stuff. But like, what does making a story for an episode of Game Nights look like? What is a story in the context of a Magic game?
So one beautiful thing about Commander is that you'll find this a lot in what people say in like good experiences about Commander, is that the best Commander games always have a story to be told, right? Where they say somebody's had an awesome Commander game. They're like, oh, well, here I was in the trenches. It was not looking good. I had this problem, and then it was so difficult to overcome. And then I draw my card for turn, and I drew the perfect card. It was nuts. I slammed it. The entire table went, whoa. But then this other person had like a reaction and was able to like counter that. But somebody else really wanted my spell to resolve. So then they countered the counter. So then the spell ended up resolving, saving the game for everybody. Like those types of stories are very, very common amongst Commander players. Like those are always the best games. And so what we try to do with Game Nights specifically is try to take those moments and like accentuate them. Make those the focus of everything. Like you'll even notice if you watch like really, really old Game Nights, they didn't follow every single play. Like the very, very first Game Nights would like skip to turn 4.
That's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So nowadays we'll go through play by play, and so that people can get a better idea of every single little thing that's going on. But the focus is always going to be the players, how they're thinking, how they're feeling throughout the game, more so than the individual gameplay itself. We care more about how cool that play was than the play itself, if that makes sense. Right? So it's very difficult to be able to... It's basically like a reality TV show, right? So if you've ever watched a reality TV show, you are following, say, Survivor or something like that, right? You are watching all of these people that all have like these storylines, all of these cutaway interviews that tell you how they're thinking, how they're feeling, and what their strategies and plans are going forward. And when they have obstacles that they have to overcome, that makes the victory so much sweeter. So imagine if you just watched the final episode of Survivor and nothing leading up to it. You don't have all
just like, okay,
yeah,
some guy won. Cool.
Exactly. You don't have all of that buildup. And so storytelling, the tricky part about it is making sure that you can kind of like lay this thread of what needs to be said all the way up until you have that like reveal moment or big moment that you have been building up to without spoiling the big moment itself.
Yep. And so a lot of that storytelling, I imagine, comes through what questions and quotes and stuff you get out of people from the interviews.
Exactly. And so with Game Nights itself, I know a lot of like Commander gameplay is oftentimes edited just pretty linearly. Of you start at the beginning and then you just chop out all the stuff that you don't want. I'll do it relatively linearly as well, but I don't chop out the stuff that I don't want. I add things that I want instead. So I'll always have two timelines. I have the game timeline and then the timeline that I'm working on, and just grab pieces and put them in and then move them around like a puzzle. Because that's what editing is for me. It always feels like a puzzle of like, how can I make these pieces fit together to make a fun and interesting story? So,
and then from there, it's done. And then you get to rest and relax.
Until the next episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is,
yep.
That is like one of the things that I enjoy the most about Game Nights.
Getting to take a game. And even, I mean, what I've noticed is that in watching Game Nights, even the games that are like a little so-so on the surface, you're still able to create something interesting out of them. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Like one of the downsides, I don't know if it's specifically a downside, but we'll always we basically have like one shot at a game, right?
Yeah.
If the game ends super early, then maybe we'll have time to redo it and
you can
shoot
just like
another
play another game.
But that rarely happens. So we're usually just stuck with the first game that we've got. And so then the challenge is always, how do you make that interesting and entertaining enough to be able to hold audience's attention for an entire episode? Like, I know when games are better than others. I know that as well as anybody else watching these things. Like, it doesn't really matter. You just got to put your best foot forward and try to be as entertaining as you possibly can and show the players in the best light as well. Because, like, for these guests, this is the one shot that they have. This is the one time that they're able to be on the show. And so if we're not giving it our all and trying to make the best show possible for them and for our audience, what are we even doing?
And that, Murph, is why you are where you are today. Because you get it.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like, basically all of this has been knowledge that's been imparted by JLK. And so
I was about to say, you've gotten to work under like one of the two Magic content goats at this time.
Yeah. And so one nice thing about not really knowing anything going into this is that basically all of my knowledge has been built from the ground up. So I have a very specialized set of skills specifically for Magic gameplay that not a lot of other people have.
Yep.
Because all of the stuff that I know about Premiere and editing and stuff, and all of the skills, techniques, is built specifically for the purpose of making good, entertaining games of Magic.
Yeah. And then if you had to make a video about something else, it may turn out a little bit different, or you have to learn more stuff. It'll obviously take like time to hone in other skills. So certainly. Well, in that case, Murph, with these skills you have built, and I mean, let's be honest, you've been working full time in Magic content for what, like 7 years now or something like that?
6 years now, yeah. It was 2018, it's now 2024.
I don't know how basic math works, Murph.
It's okay. I was homeschooled, so I barely know.
Me too. Oh, brother.
There you go. I think that was when I actually talked to you in real life for the first time at Command Fest, and I learned that you were homeschooled, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Okay,
one of our initial connection points being a homeschool all the way troopers. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyways, you've been around the game for a while. You are now the most common director of the most popular Magic the Gathering content. I imagine that you perhaps have some tips. I imagine you have some tips and or tricks for aspiring, starting out content creators, such as myself, Murph. Can you share any of them with the audience today?
Yeah. So as far as, we'll start with the very specific like gameplay stuff. So say you have a Magic the Gathering gameplay show. You're thinking, how can I make this better, more enjoyable, more fun for people to watch? Number one that people should do more is show the board more. Don't show the people as much. Show the board more. This is always like a big problem that I find with a lot of gameplay shows is that they don't show the board enough. And so it's a lot harder to be able to actually follow the game. I previously had said, hey, I don't actually care as much about the plays as I do as about the player's reaction to the game. But if people are unable to follow that game, if they are unable to follow along with what is going on, then that emotion has nothing to connect itself to. So that is a core aspect of something. Even if you are trying to be, hey, this is a good vibes channel, we're just here to have fun and hang out kind of Commander gameplay show, you need to show the board more.
Yeah, let us actually see what's going on.
Exactly. So in the same vein as that, show cards more and for longer. Another pet peeve of mine I always have is when there's a Commander gameplay show and they pull up a card and it's on screen for 2 seconds and they pull it away and I don't have time to read it. Well, why did you bring that card up in the first place? I can see it on the board. Like, I can recognize it by the art well enough. If you want me to actually read it, leave it on screen long enough for me to read it. If you don't bother putting it on screen. Like, you as the editor, the person that's making this theoretical Commander gameplay show, Like, it is your choice to determine whether you want people to read this card or not. And by putting it up for only 2 seconds and pulling it away, you are telling me don't read this card. And if you keep doing that, then you are telling me don't read anything, because it's not going to matter. It's not going to be.
I think it is like I think it is like one of those accidental like byproducts of a lot of people who are making Magic the Gathering content being very familiar with a lot of cards, and they say, "Oh yes, people who are watching this video are going to have the same library of information as me," and therefore, when for whatever reason, Dockside Extortionist is the card that pops into my head, right? I'm going to throw this Dockside Extortionist up on screen for 2 seconds, and people are going to like see and recognize the art, and they'll be like, oh yes, Dockside Extortionist, I know what that does.
Oh yeah, it's
in reality,
2 mana, 1 in a red, 1/2. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. And when it enters the battlefield, I will make treasures equal to the number of artifacts and enchantments that my opponents control. Cool. But in all reality, there very well could be people watching your content that don't know what Dockside Extortionist does.
Yes.
Much less, Dockside Extortionist is perhaps a bad example because it is one of the most iconic and at this point notorious cards that you could play in an EDH game. But, someone in the year 2024, if you cast Spell Twine in an EDH game and threw that up really quick, I would see that art and I'm go, oh yeah, that really expensive blue card I've cut from every pre-con I've bought for the last decade. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
But a lot of other people would go, oh, I have no clue what Spell Twine is, but you've already taken it off the screen.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
And it's gotten a lot worse with Magic recently. Like, I understand why you might be able to get away with it in like the year 2015 or something like that, right? But in today's day and age, there are so many cards that a random person just has never seen before. There are so many like very specific cards, and they have a lot of text on them. So a general rule of thumb that I go by, I don't hit this every single time, but is if you pull up a card, try to have it up so that you can read it all the way through twice. Right? So that's, if you're a little bit of a slower reader, it's fine. But yeah, like it can cover dialogue. It can cover conversations. What people will always try to do is they think, oh, seeing people's faces and seeing people's reactions is the most important thing. And it is a very important thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't ever show people's faces. But say you have 10 seconds of a clip and people for the first few seconds are reading the card and kind of reacting to the card and everything. At the very end, somebody tells a joke and then somebody laughs. Now, if it were up to me, I would say that the best choice as far as editing goes is to leave the card covered on screen the entire time, all the way until the laughter at the end. Because then people can read the card, people can understand the card, and potentially that joke has to do with you actually understanding what the card is, or seeing the name of the card, or something like that. Like a lot of comments on Commander, like the dialogue in game, just generally has to do with what's going on. So a lot of people will be like threat assessing and seeing people's faces. Don't threat assess and see people's faces. Threat assess and see the board. So just overall, more board, more cards. I think that is a easy trap that a lot of newer Commander gameplay shows fall into. Is I want to see people's faces because that's where the emotion is. Yeah, but people have to understand what's going on too.
And as long as they're seeing like the laughter at the end, the payoff is like there.
Exactly.
So
right, like
it just works.
You show people laughing and having a good time. That's basically all you're looking for, right? Like people understand your game and understand and can see people having a good time. You want both those things. If you have one without the other, you have a problem with your gameplay show.
Mm-hmm. Any other tips and tricks, Murph?
Yeah. I'm going to get blasted for this completely, but I would say, I made a tweet about this a while ago, but I still stand by it. If you are looking to get into the Magic the Gathering content space, I would stay away from gameplay because the market is so crowded. Unless you have a very specific hook that is interesting, that will draw people in, you are not going to succeed more likely than not, right? Because you're just going to get lost in the sea of Magic the Gathering Commander gameplay shows that are out there. Like there's already so many. And so I know it seems like I'm saying, hey, well, I edit game nights, so why would you watch anything else? But realistically, like, why are people going to watch your gameplay show when there's so many others out there? Even taking game nights completely off the list of things. Like, there's already so many other gameplay shows that are quite excellent and very, very good. So if you're trying to come to the Magic content space and saying, hey, I want to make a Commander gameplay show, and thinking that you'll just be immediately successful with it, it's probably not going to happen. From a very realistic standpoint, I know that sucks to say, and I know that sucks to hear, but I think it is currently like the most overdeveloped part of Magic the Gathering content creation, and there isn't a lot of innovation. Now, I take back all of my words if you come at this with something interesting, with an interesting hook. Like, one thing that I liked about game nights is that it came at Magic Commander gameplay with a specific solution to a problem, which was, how do we make Magic gameplay interesting? Well, you can listen to people's thoughts while showing the cards. All right, sick. You can worry a little bit more about the story than the actual gameplay. Awesome. Do that in a framing of like a reality TV show, and it's fun. It's something different. It's something new that people haven't really seen before. So if you have other ideas that people have not seen before to frame these Commander gameplay shows in, I think that's fine, and go for it, absolutely. But if all you're doing is saying, hey, me and 3 of my friends, we're going to go to an LGS, and we're going to set up some cameras, shoot some Commander gameplay, it's going to be fun, it'll be good vibes and everything. Not that that won't be fun to do. I just don't know how far you're going to be able to get with that in today's landscape. Not to mention, the Commander gameplay is hard. Like, it is hard to do, it is hard to make. Take that from somebody who has been doing this for basically like 5 years straight as their daily job. Again, obviously game nights is a very special case of we do things a little bit different than most. But even take something like Extra Turns, which is a lot less edited version of a Commander gameplay show that we do, that still takes a ton of effort and a ton of work. And I know that, like, Cal, when you were Playing with Power, I don't know how much involvement you actually had with the Commander gameplay shows, but presumably those were also still, like, a good bit of work.
Yep. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, well, even, like, I was not involved in the actual editing, but I did, like, some of the scripting, and I participated in, even shooting games for something like Playing with Power, which is a lot less involved than something like game nights or Extra Turns. It was still very time consuming. We had to be very purposeful about everything we were doing. There was a lot of mental overhead, all that kind of stuff that you have to care about to make sure a game looks nice on camera and is grokkable to people who are watching it. That adds up to a lot of work before you even step into the realm of editing, creating a story, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. It adds up a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of like different points at which you have to work very hard at things. And oftentimes the juice just is not worth the squeeze. That's something that JLK likes to say a lot of, like, here's this cool thing, but is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth it to do this for the amount that you get out of it? And like, if you're doing a Commander gameplay show and you are not happy with the views that you are getting with it, I mean, realistically, something should probably change. Because I know how difficult it is. I know how hard it is. And I don't necessarily have the answer for each individual person out there as far as like what you should do about it.
Yep.
But that's why going into Magic content creation space, I've seen what it's like from the other side of Magic gameplay, and I would say try something else. Like, I think that the Magic content creation space has so much room for different things out there that people just have not really touched, people have not really covered. Now, I don't know what those are specifically, but
yep.
I am fairly confident that we have not reached the ceiling of what's possible in Magic content.
Oh, certainly.
So if you have an awesome idea that people have not seen before, I would say go for it. Otherwise, yeah.
A lot of people have said that the gameplay market is saturated or whatever, and I don't think that's the best term for it. Yeah. I like that you said like crowded, because that's
crowded. I think it's a better word.
There seems to be like semi-infinite appetite for Commander gameplay, but there already is a ton of people doing it. And it's just like playing with power when we were we're not doing straight EDH, right? We were doing a slightly different stuff with cEDH stuff. But even with what we were doing, we were still only like the 6th most popular EDH channel out there. And we were not a small channel by any means.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of people out there. It's a big audience for it. But yeah, try to think about doing something besides just gameplay.
Yeah.
I get it.
But yeah, that's my overall advice.
Well, Murph, thank you for your advice. Thank you for telling your story. We've been running for 50 minutes now in classic fashion. I've got one more question for you, Murph, but that is going to be for the Patreon subscribers, such as yourself, Murph. You get to listen to yourself again.
Yes.
Murph, one of the first patrons of the Herald Torn podcast.
Yeah,
getting to appear on the podcast is not a Patreon perk, unfortunately, but Murph got to come on for other reasons. Dang. All right, Murph, do you have anything to plug on your way out of here?
I mean, you already plugged it. The Level Up podcast with me and Cal is where we talk about classic video games. Watch that, listen to that, share it with your friends. If you don't like classic video games, then probably don't watch that or listen to that because you probably won't like it that much. But if you're at least tangentially interested in that, I think it is a fun time, and we talk about some very interesting topics. And yeah, just watch the Command Zone stuff. If you like game nights, if you like the Command Zone, then by watching it, you are putting food on my plate. So I appreciate everybody out there that does that.
Murph, thank you for joining me on this episode of The Herald Torn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Herald Torn. Herald Torn is hosted, edited, and produced by me, Cal Jones. The co-hosts are Emma Partlow, Lexi, better known as Black Girl Mage, and Dan, better known as Moderately Anonymous MTG. All of our info lives in the podcast description. If you want to reach out to me, whether with feedback, you want to give me money, or you just want to send a letter to the editor, hit up editorial@heraldshorn.com. Thanks again for listening to The Herald Torn. We are having so much fun creating it. See you in 2 weeks.